everyone. We can go ahead and get started. Welcome to what I wish I knew when I was an identity noob. Seeing all of the newbies in identity raising their hands, at that opening keynote was like, wow, this is amazing. That'll stick with me, I think, forever. And it made me feel like, wow, I'm really glad we chose this topic. So we can hopefully help you understand some things that we've learned maybe the hard way, and also give you some reassurance about working in this industry and what to expect and how to kind of help yourself along. I think we have a really diverse panel today in terms of how long we've been in identity, what we do in identity, and our perspectives. And then I think as we discuss, you'll hear our perspectives where they kind of collide, and that's interesting as well. So I'm Hannah Suter. I'm a principal product manager at GitLab. I oversee our authentication and authorization at GitLab. I'm here with Sheetal, Beth, and Andrew, and I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Hey everyone, nice to see you guys here. I'm Sheetal. I'm a product manager at One Cosmos. We provide passwordless and ID verification solutions for enterprise and customers. My entry into identity was extremely accidental. My career began as a UX designer, designing mobile apps, web apps from back in 2010. I accidentally entered the identity industry, and from there on, struggled through it. So I just feel very happy being here, sharing my struggles with all of you today. We're a core identity company, so really the level of effort that it took for me to upskill and do my job well was pretty high.
So Hannah was very nice. She said longevity in identity. She did not call me out as a dinosaur. I will say that yes, I am, or I have a lot of experience. I started my career in radar design and moved to systems and then cybersecurity and specialized in ICAM and digital identity. Let me start at the beginning. I'm Beth Abramowitz. I am a principal cybersecurity engineer at the MITRE Corporation. We are a federally funded research and development center. We work for the government. My primary interests are cybersecurity, ICAM, and digital identity. Wow, big surprise, right? I do work for the government in enterprise, coalition, and federation environments. And I have a great job because I look at next generation products and tools from a strategy, technical, protocol, and standards level to help for future mission needs.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Cameron, and I am a senior technologist for identity and access management at General Motors. I don't know from experience, I may be the senior identity guy here. I've about 20 years. No? No?
Yeah, Beth has you beat.
No, I meant Beth has me beat. Okay, cool. All right. Well, anyway, 20 years in identity.
Thanks, Lori.
When I started, and I tell the story, I gave it a couple of my talks this week, that when I started in identity, I was the LDAP team, right? I was the team that supported the LDAP servers in the environment. And to see where the industry has evolved from what that was back then, when we used to have to go to our executives and give them a pitch on why single sign-on was like a cool thing, right? Why you should want to do single sign-on with our LDAP environment. So done a lot. My main focus these days are strategy and implementations for both sides of kind of the identity fence, where I help drive strategy and technology for our workforce identity platforms, and I do the same thing for our B2C identity platform. So as you can imagine, at the scale of General Motors, it's a busy gig. So happy to be here and really happy to see almost a packed house here. This is pretty cool.
All right, so panelists, let's cut to the chase. So we'll start out with answering the big question first. So what is one thing that you wish you knew when you were new in identity?
All right, I'll start with that. It's easy. The same word mean different things, and different things in different contexts. And my favorite one here is federation. And I'm going to start with it, don't be afraid to say what I mean by that is, or what do you mean by that? Federation. Are we talking authentication federation? Are we talking attribute federation? Data federation? And even if we are, what data are we federating? And what format is that in? And people you can have a whole conversation and talk past each other and think that you've come to agreement, and you haven't even had the same conversation, even if you've been in identity for 20 years. People forget to talk about the details. So if you're new, if you're experienced, it's very easy. Just say, I think we're talking about this, or what do you mean by that? And it's not just federation. There are lots of words like that.
So for me personally, when I was starting off, it was hard to come to speed with terms. Federation, wallets, verifiable credentials. There was just way too many big words in the room. So I had to think about the problem very differently, right? So I said, let me start on the other end of the spectrum. Let me understand what kind of business outcomes we're trying to drive, right? So I said, let me talk to CISOs, let me talk to the end users who are actually using the technology, and let me talk to my own product team to understand what is it that we are trying to drive. So when I started there, it made it a lot more easier for me to tie it back to what is the technology that really serves this audience, right? So if you're new to identity, definitely don't start with understanding the protocols. Start with having conversations with folks and understanding why you're doing what you're doing.
I think the biggest difference in the focus on identity today versus even 5 to 10 years ago, and what I wish I knew, and it became evident to me early on, was it's about security, stupid, right? I mean, identity is so core to everything that we do around security that in my early years, we started off thinking that identity was, it was about SSO, it was about enabling application experiences, and it is. And that's why one of the biggest challenges is being able to strike that balance between user experience and being secure. But I was kind of late to the game of realizing how critical it was to security. And I think that's a benefit that noobs will have today, is that it's, you can't talk about zero trust. You can't talk about, authentication without understanding the security implications. So that's what I think is kind of the thing I wish I knew earlier, and I'm glad it's well known now.
All right, next up, we have a question, but I want to share this first. We all came together and compiled a list of resources that we thought were helpful for newbies, and hopefully the link works. Someone shout if it doesn't, but you can bookmark it and come back to it. We've linked and sort of given a description to all of the resources. But we wanted to talk about if you just got your first job in identity, where would you spend your time ramping up? Where do you start?
So I think when I first got my job, I started off with talking to a lot of security architects inside my company to understand what our product does, how it meets the solution, and of course talking to implementation teams, because that's where I started. What kind of gaps are we seeing in the market? How do you go about implementing this, and things like that. So that's the first place that I started. The second place was truly becoming a generalist. How do you become a generalist in this area? So I started listening to a lot of podcasts, familiarizing myself with the most recent incidents, from the MGM hack to what happened at Microsoft. All of these instances were primary areas for me to understand the problem statement better and have a good conversation with anybody, starting from product to a customer. And finally, there are certifications. I did a lot of Udemy courses to really ramp up and understand from SAML to IDC to any topic, right? You had to have a certain level of proficiency before you begin implementing those products. So that's how I began my ramp up as being new in the industry.
I think Sheetal, just touched on what I would recommend is that getting in touch with key standards and understanding what they are is kind of really important, because what you benefit from is that if you are actually able to participate in some of the standards committees, even just from a monitoring and understanding it, you get to see the perspectives of multiple companies and the kinds of problems that they're trying to solve with the standards. And then you can have a product agnostic view of what a standard is trying to accomplish, right? Everyone throws around what SAML is. Everyone throws around what OpenID Connect. Well, what is the auth code flow? What is PKCE? Those are kind of things that if you're really trying to get into identity, those are key to be able to understand, at least from a technical perspective. And the standards kind of define them, and they don't require that you have to dive into a particular product to understand it. And I think it's a really good thing to get involved in if you're just trying to learn what the industry is about, is to understand what the key standards are.
All right, up next. Being new in identity, reflecting back on your work experience, what did you learn that you didn't expect to learn when you first came in?
So it's not all about the technology. You need to take into account business needs, and there's a balance here. Being a geek, you want to say, hey, this is neat, this is cool, and you talk to the people you need to talk to technically, but if it doesn't work for the business, it really doesn't make any sense.
I think for me, the biggest discovery was people care as much about user experience as much as they do care about security, right? Every CISO who I've spoken to has always told me that, hey, tech apart, what is this going to look like for my end user? Am I introducing more friction? And they really care about how they seem in front of their audience. So building technology was only 50% of the equation. The other part is going to be user experience. How well are your users going to adopt it? How are you going to measure that adoption? As well as how well you train your users to do it. So I think that was the biggest learning for me, that your technology only goes 50%. There's another 50% that you have to cover with your product when it comes to building identity and authentication.
Yeah, I'll reinforce those two opinions that implementing identity, especially in a large enterprise, is really hard because of everything that was mentioned around stakeholder impact and the effort that you have to go through to make sure that you have addressed all of the key stakeholders for identity in the enterprise, right? It's really easy to implement a new password policy, right? But if you have an application that is implementing the password policy improperly and you change it and you break their experience, then you're creating an outage, right? And so those are the kind of things that you have to take into consideration, and it really involves a lot of overhead to engage your application and IT community to make sure that when you make changes in identity that as many as possible. Sometimes people have to be brought along for the ride, but you have to really engage your stakeholder community because of the horizontal impact that identity has across the enterprise.
I wanted to chime in on this one about one thing I learned I didn't expect to. When I got my start in identity, I still haven't worked for a company that their product is identity. I've worked only at companies where identity is part of the larger product, if that makes sense, leaving me feeling sometimes like I was alone, or there wasn't anybody else that I could really talk to about identity and really understood the challenges. So that led me to seek out, a community and other people who could talk identity, right? And so that's how I ended up here. And that is one thing that I found is the community around identity is really amazing. We're so happy to have so many new people in it as well. And I would encourage you just to get involved. There's, not a lot of egos. There's really friendly people. And I think the community aspect of identity is really something that I didn't expect to ever get out of it. So Next question. Everybody talks about a mentor and networking, but being new in identity, I don't know anyone. How do I tackle that?
You walk up to somebody and you say, hello, I'm so-and-so. Nice to meet you. Everybody here is really nice and very friendly, and it's very easy. And you join groups, ID Pro, FIDO Alliance. You join working groups. You figure out where you can meet people and where you can do good. FIDO Alliance working groups, areas of interest, you can actually make a difference. And if you don't want to just speak up right away, you can listen in and figure out what's happening. All the IETF, IGov working groups, same thing. On the resource list, I put a link to, I'm blanking on whose list of conferences. It's updated regularly. You will find, yes, Heather Flanagan's list, thank you, Lorraine. That list is updated regularly. You will find that there are plenty of conferences, since, thank you, COVID, that allow remote attendance, and some of them have, if not free attendance, they have free webinars prior to their attendance, or they have free postings of their slides after their conferences. Lots of good things there to learn.
Just join ID Pro. I mean, I can't make it any more clear that everything that everyone else said, the community is engaging, the content, the Slack channel, if you just do it just to be involved with the Slack channel is probably worth it. But if you want to get engaged and understand what identity is about, do yourself a favor and join ID Pro.
And don't forget your own company. Talk to people in your own company that are doing what you're doing. And you don't have to go up to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? If you start working with somebody and talking to them, that kind of stuff kind of happens.
All right, next up. So identity is such a huge area, as we've all noticed from being at this conference, right? Years in, I'm still overwhelmed by the breadth. How do I learn it all, or where do I start?
Me again? Okay, you don't. It's too big. So if you're lucky enough to not be assigned something right away, you align. ICAM has something for everybody. And from strategy and policy to hands-on to technology to standards and protocols, you align with your strengths. I would encourage everybody, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your field, no matter if you're in marketing and sales or hands-on, get a cybersecurity background first. It will help you understand why you're doing what you're doing. It will help you do whatever it is you're doing better.
I would echo that, and it is impossible and not a good spend of your time to try to take on the entire space of identity. There is some benefit in understanding a first kind of shallow layer of how all of the key functional areas interact. And at that point, you can make a decision on where you might want to dive in deeper, right? What's more interesting to you to be able to dive in deeper? Are you about governance? Are you about authentication and security? Are you about data quality? I mean, those are all disciplines that have a place in identity, and you don't need to know every piece of all of it, but understanding the broad landscape, and in fact, there's every Identityverse conference, there's an introduction to identity. I think Lance did it this year, and you can look up the videos from previous years. Highly recommended. There's actual diagrams that kind of lay out the identity landscape, and just. Yep, that's another good source. Yep. And then you can, as you understand the higher level landscape, then you can make decisions about where you want to dive in deeper.
Okay. Do you have an embarrassing identity newbie moment? And if so, will you please share?
So I definitely have one. I read all these articles about breaches, and the simple thing they tell you is, hey, you just have to enable multi-factor authentication. And they said SMS OTP is definitely not the way to go because that's, again, not phishing resistant. So I go ahead, enable multi-factor authentication on every account that I know, Facebook, Instagram, every social media account has multi-factor. And I'm doing great. I have like TOTPs from all these authenticators, Duo, Auth, everything. And then I go ahead and change my device. And I have no idea how to recover any of these accounts because I never understood what a recovery code was until I actually moved the device. And I was like, wow, I am stuck. I did not get access back to any of my social media accounts because I didn't save any of the account recovery codes. I think that was a true moment that helped me realize that we haven't solved such a simple problem of account recovery. And if me being in the industry didn't really remember that, hey, I'm supposed to save these codes in a safe place in my keychain or with a hardware token, man, I don't know how an end user is really going to understand that. So I think account recovery is definitely one of my, I'm passionate about that problem, right? As to why didn't we solve that problem in an easy enough manner? So that's my story.
I have a few, some that I wouldn't want to share publicly, but one that comes to mind that, again, in a large enterprise, identity being so critical and horizontal to everything, and when you have literally all of the applications in your enterprise that depend on the identity service, one small policy change can throw a whole lot of wrenches into the mix. So I was intending to make things more secure by turning on a managed device flag in our environment that would require people accessing certain applications to be on a managed device without actually realizing that all of our employee laptops were not actually managed by our cloud platform, right? So turning that on, people who were managed didn't recognize it, but actually people who were unmanaged, who were still accessing applications, they were kind of locked out, right? So caused a little bit of an impact there. Easy fix, but those are the things that you kind of learn, and you have to make sure that even minor policy change has to be vetted, tested, validated in a non-prod environment before you do something in production.
I can share mine too. So my first job in identity, I got sort of picked up for an identity job because I had a background in developer tools. They're like, well, if you're technical enough to handle developer tools, I think you can do identity too. Looking back, a little bit of a stretch there, but hey, it worked. And so it was my first time deciding what my identity team should work on. In product, we're responsible for sort of prioritizing what the team works on. And there was an open item in the backlog for the product I worked on at the time for supporting, not enforcing, but just supporting two-factor auth. So you could only log in via username and password. We didn't even have support for our customers to choose multi-factor if they wanted to. I overlooked that for a good year and thought, oh, there's other more important things to work on. We need to work on some licensing stuff and things that sort of intersect with identity. And looking back on it, I'm like, that was mortifying that I let that sit for a year when it was the most basic thing that our product should support in terms of securing our product for our customers. So that was a lapse, but it was simply because I just didn't know enough about identity yet. One thing I did, though, whenever we did support multi-factor, is that we decided not to support SMS for the security reasons that were already mentioned. So I feel like at least I redeemed myself with that one because we moved on to more secure forms of authentication for our customers. All right, next question. Every year, ID Pro sends out a skills survey where they try to get a pulse on professional development and career growth in identity. They asked the question on there, how long does it take to feel proficient in identity? And 35% of respondents said 2 to 5 years, 21% said 6 to 10, and then the rest of the half of percentage of people were sort of spread all over the map. I was wondering how the panel feels about that.
I think that number seems smaller than what it had been in previous years of the survey because Typically, what I've heard from most identity professionals who've been in the industry for a while, that it was a minimum 5 years before they felt competent, and at least 10 years before they were proficient, right? And there are a lot of reasons for that. Industry is evolving, tools are evolving, but I guess maybe they sound right now, but to me, at least based on my experience, I was closer to 10 years before I felt really competent and able to speak about identity practices that were not product specific, right? To be able to address a business need independent of what a product could do. And I think that's kind of one of the key aspects of being able to be proficient.
I mean, I feel like that question should have said, how long does it take for you not to feel like an imposter? Because, I'm around the 5 to 6 year mark, and I still don't feel like I'm qualified enough to sit here. But yeah, so I think I've always struggled with feeling like an imposter in this industry. I don't know if it's going to take another 5 years in the industry to really feel proficient. I'm just going with the flow, to be honest.
Okay, switching directions a little bit. As an identity newbie, how much should I be using AI in my daily practices with identity? And if I don't use it, am I going to fall behind?
I mean, we run a product company, so essentially when the whole boom about AI came about, everybody's like, what are you guys doing for AI? What are you guys doing for AI? I mean, till date, I think even at this conference, one of my biggest motivations was to understand what is everybody else in the IAM space doing with AI. I mean, we personally haven't done anything, but what we think we will do, or what insights I have gained from this particular conference, is about, can my AI tool answer simple questions like who has access to what, instead of me having to go through multiple reports and trying to understand that kind of information. Did multiple logins happen from the same IP? It's a simple human understandable question instead of having somebody else go through reports. It's particularly helpful for support staff. An administrator, a lot easier for them to go through a graph, event logs, and understand questions, but not so much for like support staff or a help desk admin. So that's one area that I thought, hey, AI might really be helpful. The other area was definitely around anomalies, right? Anywhere that you've seen a login, and I think it's been discussed widely across this entire conference that, hey, anytime you see login behavior that is a particular behavior and then you see an anomaly, you're going to use AI to read through all of that data. But I think it brings in a rich perspective, right? If you begin to observe patterns of behavior with particular users, hey, you travel to, say, Rochester for work between Monday through Thursday, and then you're coming back home, which means your location has changed. Is it really impossible travel? You begin to observe patterns like that about individual users, and you can make richer decisions over time. So that's how I believe we will begin to look at implementing or researching different AI tools about how you can make the decision-making process a lot more easier. So we haven't jumped on that bus yet. We're here to more learn insights with respect to AI.
Obviously, I think identity is sort of the killer app implementation possibility for AI because of the large amounts of data that is dealt with, from the number of identities that you may have to deal with if you're in a large enterprise to the massive amounts of logs and signals that get created. AI is that, at the moment, is the possibility of being able to solve that for you without, being a big data practitioner, right? And so, it's going to be necessary to understand exactly how AI can benefit us as identity and security professionals. And you'll start to see, I was just at RSA a couple of weeks ago, and literally, and it was my first time, and so when I walk out to the exhibit hall floor, I was just like a child, like, oh, wow. It's just security companies as far as you could see, and all of them have some sort of we can do AI capability as part of their product offering. And Is it relevant? In some cases, maybe. Some cases, probably not. But it will make a difference, and it will be something that we need to be familiar with. And it's probably early still now, but you can't ignore it at this point. You have to make sure that you understand what are the benefits of leveraging it, and the tools will be more productive with it as we move forward.
I can add one sort of tactical suggestion for maybe how you can use AI as a newbie. I knew someone who was studying for a job interview and used AI to kind of say, give me a 10-question quiz on the basics of topic X. So you could do something like that with some of the identity-specific terms or concepts and get AI to kind of give you a little quiz. Just one idea for how you might be able to use it to your advantage when you're trying to learn more about identity. All right, so I'm an identity newbie. I've identified a technology for identity that seems really cool, maybe even from here at the expo hall, right? You're excited about some of the stuff you've learned. How do I know if I should take that back to my company and approach them with that solution?
Okay, so I like neat and cool, and it's part of my job. But there's a big difference between neat and cool and it should be deployed at my company. There's a lot of things, including, does it fit a business need? Does it integrate with anything at my company? Does it fit within the budget? Does it fit within the budget cycle? Where is that product? Does it fit within the culture of my company? Where is that product in its maturity cycle? I am not going to take a beta product or a pre-beta product back to my company and say, hey, this is really cool, we should deploy this. What are its competitors? And even though it's neat and cool, it may have 5 or 6 competitors that might do just what it does and more, and might be more appropriate for my company. Sorry, does it integrate with the other products? And is this something that is really deployable? Is this something I want to bring into the lab and look at? What is it I want to do with it? So I'll leave it at that. But Andrew, I'm sure Andrew has a lot more ideas.
All of what you said is correct. I think the biggest thing to understand when you walk in an exhibit hall and see a fancy demo is that there's a form and function understanding you need to have for a product before you just run back and say that we should buy it and use it, right? So, one of the biggest pet peeves that my CISO has when we talk about what our software spend is going to be for the coming year, it's, do we need this many security products? Are some of them kind of overlapping in terms of capability? And the answer is obviously yes. And so that's really the understanding that you need before you just bring in a new product that probably you already have something within your enterprise that's already handling that capability. And especially now that it's pretty easy to go and spin up someone's new cloud focused offering. So it's really key to know kind of form and fit within your enterprise, within your existing set of tools before you just run off and buy something. And it also helps you, if you're a newbie in the space, it helps you understand how certain functions are realized from a particular product, right? Because the last thing you want to do is to keep dumping in new products and creating cost for a bunch of products that do a lot of the same thing.
Definitely, you want to, I think we're all in a marketplace where everybody's trying to consolidate IAM tools. So bringing a new product, definitely probably not the right answer. I'm all for bringing on new technologies, modern auth, right? That's the place to be in. But how do you convince your team or your business stakeholders to go for that? at a place like Identiverse, one of the things that I found are success stories, right? You have large companies like United who have gone ahead and implemented certain initiatives. They have metrics. They have metrics about their success story. What was the adoption? What is the time taken for a particular user to go through a particular use case? Is it really convenient? So those are the metrics that you want to take back to your stakeholders and tell them that, hey, these are the metrics from this particular case study, and this is why we should probably consider going the direction of passkeys or going the direction of verifiable credentials. Why should we should do that? So any kind of metrics is going to give you a great story to tell, especially if you want your business stakeholders listening. The second thing is you're looking for cost savings, right? What is the cost savings that my business is going to get as a result of implementing this? A great use case would be account recovery, right? If you're going to do account recovery using ID verification, what is going to be the cost benefit? So you come to a conference like this, you're looking for other people who've done similar implementations, you're looking for data like that, taking those things back to really build a great story.
All right, awesome. So we're coming up on our last question, and that will leave us with about 10 minutes for audience questions. So if you have one, please vocalize once we start that process here. But to kind of close out the content of the panel, is there any final piece of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience? It doesn't even have to be identity specific. It can be just related to security or life, but let us know your final piece of wisdom to share with the group.
I think the exciting aspect of being at these conferences and being in this post-COVID world is gratifying to me to see that the community is actually come back stronger than ever. And I think the value of community and engaging in that community is something that all of us can take on as that kind of responsibility, right? And that's why I'm saying, go join ID Pro, go engage in the forums where relevant discussions are happening about how to implement security within your enterprises and within your workplaces, because it's really, we are all sort of kind of soldiers in this battle to keep the things that are valuable to us protected. And we are all, whether we call ourselves identity or security, we're all about security, I would say, for the most part. And that's part that engage in community and kind of and make sure you try to contribute to it and grow it.
So I'm going to cheat. I have two things. One is on the resource list. SANS has an excellent glossary of terms. It's one of the best things that I have found, and it's actually called out separately with its own link. And I think it's just awesome. It's very, very useful. And the next thing is my real last bit of wisdom, and it's the interfaces. It's always been the interfaces. It's always going to be the interfaces. That's where all the evil happens, and where the devil's in the details, and the details are in the interfaces.
I think my own words of wisdom would be, I heard this, Andrew was saying this in the opening keynote. I think as an identity professional, every one of us have to have that commitment to privacy, right? Where is my data going? How is it being protected? If I'm giving you my biometrics, my face, how well is it being handled? I mean, I have an 8-year-old daughter. I know Hannah has an 8-year-old as well. So we're all thinking about the next generation. How do we really protect data? How do we make them aware of where all of your data is distributed? Healthcare is another industry that, I really found a problem statement there, where your own health data is across so many systems, but has never been aggregated. I also see a need for different identity professionals across the same industry to come together, especially healthcare was like the best example that I could take of, where if these healthcare providers could come together and really aggregate data, it would be an awesome experience for the end consumer. So if we all have that goal in mind of putting the consumer first, making sure we're building privacy-preserving experiences, I think we're headed to a good place.
Yeah, and I think mine would be kind of going with picking up off where Sheetal left off, is that I think this industry, what makes me stay in identity is that this has a lot of meaning, right? Like, we are the front gate for any product. We are part of the security. We're part of the user experience. If what we do doesn't work, then you can't use the product. So we're a large impact area, and I've never been one to shy away from a challenge. And I feel like this is a really challenging area to work in because the responsibility is so high and it's not always glamorous. But I think that the impact that you can have is equally as sized. So I hope that you can be excited about the industry you've landed in, because I do think it's a really special space to be in. And we can go ahead and move on to audience questions. We'll hand Lorraine a mic.
As a former security nerd who pivoted into identity, I have a tendency to want to keep things as secure as possible and tighten all the belts that I can. And sometimes that can cause some friction with business processes. And I don't know if you have any advice for when to be a little more flexible with the business processes and when to pick a fight over, no, that isn't secure, we need to make a change.
So I have a lot of recent experience in having fights picked with with me because of simple things of just trying to adding MFA to our user experience, for example. But I think you have to do some due diligence in terms of, from a threat perspective, what has to be protected versus the value of the user experience that you're possibly trying to enable, right? If, to me, if we were responsible, if I was given the responsibility of securing the user experience, I would want to make sure that all of the tools available to the user to be able to secure themselves, right? Depending on who you talk to from our business, they might be more focused on giving them a happy path to get to whatever our business function that we're trying to provide, so they can get into our mobile app and start our cars and do all the cool stuff that we do with our customers. And they're less concerned. They will never say that they're not concerned about security, but they're less concerned about it. So I think there's a balancing act there, but typically security has the best case to make when in that discussion.
I would like to add one thing to that. This is, a tension I see all the time, and I'm well aware of, and recently I've suffered the impacts of our security team maybe having too loud of a voice that I wish I would have pushed back on more. But one way I've seen this balanced well is whenever you continue to let people operate the way they were, but that any new security measure on something new is by default. So like, for example, you might let people keep their accounts without multi-factor auth, but for any new accounts, you might make them have it. Or, a credential could live indefinitely before you want to enforce some kind of end date on that credential, while any new credential that's made has an enforced expiry, but you continue to let the legacy ones live as they are. And that kind of provides a nice gateway, a balance of making things more secure, at least for the new ones. And then in the meantime, you can decide a migration plan or something for more legacy things, but that helps mitigate some of the user impact. Does anybody else have a question? Okay.
Hi. So one of the themes in the conference that I'm noticing so far is how identity and security are like one and the same thing, and we should be thinking about them together. But most of the talks have been about the active users that a company has, and how do we keep their accounts secure? How do we make sure fraudsters don't get access to them? What about and then in terms of standards, it seems like there's a lot of standards about what is good authentication look like, what is phishing resistant and stuff. But then how do you handle user accounts that are just dormant? They used to use the product maybe a few years ago. They don't use it anymore, and these accounts are probably also prone to getting attacked by fraudsters. I haven't heard of any standards in that domain. I see that different companies have different policies. For example, Google, after 2 years, if you don't use your account, you get an email that says that we'll be deleting your account. So any ideas or plans or thoughts around how to handle that side of the equation?
Okay, so to rephrase your question, it is is the panel aware of any best practices with regards to inactive accounts because of their potential for security implications? Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
So most of your IDP products should be tracking active logins, right? So any of your popular especially in the workforce scenario, you're looking at an IDP product, it's going to be tracking your active logins, and it should give you which are the dormant accounts, right? If it is not, you also have intelligence platforms that you can build above your IDP that will tell you which are the dormant accounts, which accounts have multiple accounts logging in from the same IP or logging in from the same phone number, or they've had activity after an extended period of dormancy. So you probably would need to consider having an IDP plus an identity intelligence product in that kind of scenario.
I would chime in with most. I think it depends on which dimension of the user, of the type of user that you're talking about. In the enterprise, there are some pretty well-formed processes that ensure that anyone who has access to something is recently involved in using it and leveraging an entitlement, right? And so, and most governance tools give you the ability to either automatically remove or have the owner of an entitlement remove somebody if they haven't accessed whatever resources they are. On the consumer side, it's a bit more challenging, and it's business kind of context specific because, again, there is a security implication to just leaving active accounts in your environment. That could be, especially if you don't have proper MFA in place, that those accounts are typically then the ones that are most likely to be involved in a data breach and used in a password spray attack, right? And so you have to make sure that on the consumer side that you have the proper risk detection and threat enforcement to kind of block the base level password attacks. And you need policies in place to leverage analytics, to leverage the tools to tell you if you have large numbers of accounts that have been created and only logged into once, right? Those are the kind of things, you need that analytic background to be able to make decisions to either delete, archive, remove those accounts from your active environment.
I have one to expand on the analytics piece. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you guys for being here. Very helpful. I've got a background in data analytics. I've only been in identity for about 2 years, and I've been hearing this term identity analytics thrown around. You guys have any ideas on that or thoughts in general about, is that an actual role, or is this something somebody's just made up to sound really good right now?
It's a real thing.
Okay.
Watch my talk from yesterday.
Awesome.
So there are key metrics that you want to be aware of for the identity experience, and I am getting the flag that my time is up. But I'll give you a short answer. Yes, identity analytics are a thing. Anything related to behavior of a user or an account is something that you would want to have, typically you want to have analytics about. The previous question about account lifetime, who's been using our service, things like that, I think very relevant and a necessary thing as well.
Thank you, Hannah, for doing this panel. I think it was really important to have something targeting us newbies here, so thank you. And also, I want to also echo, take a look at the ID Pro booth. We are here. Talk to them. Join. They are a wonderful resource. They have a body of knowledge. They are the Bach that you could really learn a lot of things from. And again, that Slack channel is priceless. Thank you.
It's very valuable.
Thank you all very much.